Hi there, Miss Lams here. In this video, we would like to talk about the IB Biology EE. This video is mainly focused on the overall flow of your Biology EE. The list is just an overall guidance as to how you can work with it. Regarding to the highlights of each criteria, we will explain them in the next few videos later on. So let's get started. These are the scoring criteria and grade boundary for the IB Biology EE. So yes, these are the score allocated to these criteria and these are the grade boundaries. Again, just a reminder, this is the aim of the video is to show the overall layout of your essay. So what we expect students to write them out. Regarding to the highlights for each criteria will be covered in the short videos later on. So let's get started. So for overall starter, so compare with the biology IA where you have a 12-page limit. In the biology EE, you don't have the page limit. However, you do have a 4,000 word count limit. So watch out for the word count. And we will talk about what is counted in the word count and what is not counted in the word count. So generally speaking, since we don't have the word count problem, so a lot of students will make a cover page. So in the cover page, we expect the following, such as the title, your research question, the subject in this case with biology, personal code, exam sections, and the word count. And the next part will be the content page. So to talk about different sections and then assign the page number to it. So just a reminder just to make sure that your page numbers are correct because in the past we have examiner penalizing candidate for having the wrong page number. And then the next part is to standardize your work. So place your personal code on the top right header on every page. If you place it on the header, then it will automatically show on every page. And then your page number at the bottom right. So the page number is very important because it helps the examiner to navigate your extended essay. So make sure you got this correct. And then the next part is the introductions. What we expect in the introduction is, for example, you to provide the context. So why you want to do this experiment. And it'll be good to mention your RQ and just to state that why your RQ worth investigating. So for example, certain areas of, let's say, green tea is not extensively researched on, and based on your research with other university and stuff like that, Google Scholar, then you want to, based on experiment, to look into certain aspect of the green tea. So you look into that. And then, of course, you need to include the biological theory behind it. So this relates to the plannings. So while you are writing your introductions, it'll be good that you can also lead your readers as to the direction of your essay. So for example, usually for biology EE, it comes with different layers of experiments. So not just one simple experiment will do. Usually for biology EE will be one experiment leading to the next one. So it's good to point out the directions of the essay, so the layers, if possible. Usually at first glance it's quite difficult because you are still planning for experiments, but later on, as you have got a set of data, you understand it better, then you have lay out your direction of your essay will be easier. And the next part is same as IA, so you need to list out your variables. Same thing, so you need to justify for IV, you need to justify why you use this concentration and volume. So this relates to the pilot study you have conducted previously. The DV, now this one's important, how you interpret your result. So for example, in microbiology, we will say that, so the diameter of the inhibition zone is an indicator of the strength of the antimicrobial effect of certain agents. So you need to state that link very clearly. So the link, how your experiment data is linked to your dependent variables. So there you go. And then next part, after you listing out the variables, then you should mention about the method, you to justify the method. So for example, again, I use the idea of microbiology. So usually there's two mainstream, one is spread plate method, another one is pour plate method. So if you choose one of them, let's say you, in the case of inhibition zone will be the spread plate method, then then you to say why you prefer spread play method in your experiment rather than plot play method. Justify your method. And then another few things that mentioned by the examiner feedback is that what candidate need to watch out for the positive and the negative control, which we will cover in the next few videos later on. Because when you will talk about your method, when you're explaining your method and elaborating your method, you need to mention what are your positive control and what are your negative control. And the next part is the apparatus list. So you need to also include the uncertainty, okay, and materials, precaution, the safety, methods. You need to list out the steps of your method. And the next part, the result. Okay, so assuming your experiment went well, you collect some data, you got some result. This section mainly is very similar to the biology IA, so you can also refer to those videos. So what are we looking for? So for example, such as your observation, your qualitative data, and your numerical data, the quantitative data, formulas, sample calculation, process data, graphs. Now note that this is more than one graph because some students, they need to do like different layers of experiments, right? So one experiment lead to another. So perhaps there could be more than one graph. And the next one is the statistic test, if needed. Next part is the discussion part. Okay, so this is very important, and discussion has separated mainly into two parts. One is the data analysis, so very similar as to the biology IA. So you point out what is your numerical data, your observations, table, graph, statistics test, and then also mention your biological theory behind it. But the next part is much more challenging. This is the real differences between the biology IA and biology EE. It's the evaluation. Now, this evaluation is not just referring the experiment floor and things like that. The evaluation in here is talking about how you process your reference, how you use your reference in your external essay. Okay, so let's look into it. So, for example, you need to assess whether these external studies support or against your experiment data and explain why. So a well-weighted external essay should have both sides of the arguments. Okay, so not just you don't cherry picking your reference. It's possible that some reference goes against your idea. Then you need to look into why. Okay, it's worthwhile to mention those and why is it like that. Okay, and the next one is assess the reliability, okay, or suppose the method of external study. Now, after you have done your research, you need to understand what those study is about. You need to understand the methods and things like that. So then you can assess it. Okay, so whether you look at the experiment and then look at whether the experiment are reliable. So in the past, I have some students done some the effect of caffeine on humans, okay, and then but the experiment is about okay, so and then but the test subject is only like 8 or 16 small sample size, so then they can evaluate, criticize, actually the test subject number, the sample size is not big enough to generate a reliable data, things like that. So you need to look into the method of the external studies. Okay, so that's the method part that you still need to criticize or maybe agree on. And the next part is the reliability, so the source of your data. So for example, if you quote something that is from Cosmo Health comparing to something that is a study done by university, then of course a study done by university is much more reliable than an article that comes from, let's say, Cosmo Health. Okay, so again, you need to think about the source of the data. And another interesting thing is, like, for example, some students in the past even look into the source of funding. So there could be a conflict of interest. So for example, McDonald's could be funding saying that, McDonald's meal has nothing to do with heart attack or something like that, or lung disease or lung cancer, things like that. So again, they also look into the source of funding, whether the experiment is biased and things like that. So yeah, this is very interesting if you can really look into the reference that you're looking at. So sometimes in biology EE, sometimes we look at quality than quantity. So a lot of students, they just in the past they just look at a lot of reference and then they just look at the reference in order to quote what they are saying, but then that's not the purpose of those external studies. Okay, so you need to have a deeper look into those. And yeah, assess to what extent this external study helps your experiment. So in the past, I have some students working at like they have caffeine on mealworm movement or things like that. So but however, they couldn't find a lot of study about mealworms from the universe study. In fact, the universe study mostly focused on human test subjects. So they have caffeine on human body rather than on mealworms. So then they can say that, oh, actually, these external study may not be directly applicable to the experiment, things like that. So to what extent? Okay, so you need to, again, it's very important that you need to understand the external study that you have obtained and see how well it applies to your essay. Okay, so that is the critical thinking part. Oh, so sorry. I thought that we were going to talk about briefly, but then I start elaborating. Yes, okay, we'll look a little bit more about this area later on in more videos. And then the endings. Like I mentioned in the biology IA videos, I've mentioned that the differences, the biggest differences between biology IA and biology EE is the layout and the focus of your skills. So for example, in biology IA, you will have conclusion, then evaluation. But then the evaluation is just evaluating your experiment. Whereas in the biology EE, you will have evaluation before the conclusion. Now, the evaluation in this part is not just focusing on your experiment, but also focusing on how you use your references. Okay, so your reference. So that's why just now we have the evaluation first, then comes the conclusion. Now, the conclusion is not just the conclusion of your experiment, it's the conclusion of your whole essay. So, for example, you can briefly mention that the pros and like the things that supports you and against you, a study that support and against you, and then you briefly present your data, okay, and then what your conclusions are. So that is the conclusion of the whole essay. So some students may ask, oh, so where would I write my conclusion of my experiment data? I usually recommend it put under the data analysis part, okay? So you can mention that later on. There you go, there. And then, so here, this part conclusion is the conclusion of the whole essay. And the next part is suggest for any relevant further work. And finally, the bibliography in MLA format and the appendix. So by the time then they'll be fine. Okay, of course there will be some you will also have done those free reflection form as well, but we will talk about that later on as well. So that's about it. I hope this video helps you and guide you through in your biology EE. So stay positive. Okay, make sure you communicate with your biology supervisor from time to time. Keep him or her updated of your progress. If you have any bottleneck on your research, feel free to consult them. Okay, so add oil and thank you and bye bye.